Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Fans of Raymond, welcome. We are live. We are very much live. I want to welcome all of you. Thanks for joining. And we're going to try and do this once a week at least. Hopefully on the weekends. It's better for everybody. And we're trying to find a good time that works because we have fans in London, we have fans in Australia, we have fans everywhere, and so to try and figure out a time, we can't do it for everybody, obviously, to make everybody the same time, but hopefully it's good. Hello from England. Yes, hello. So I thought I have a lot of guests lined up, not today, but I thought I would answer questions, and for all 9 seasons of Raymond, I would stand in the audience and answer audience questions that they had during the filming of the show. Mark Sweet was the warm-up comedian, and when he needed a break, I would go up there and just talk to the audience, sometimes for an hour at a time, etc. So I just figured I'd try and answer questions, because when we have a guest, I don't want to be rude to whoever I'm interviewing, so I try to go back and see the questions, but I can't usually do that for all the questions anyway. So I think just to start off, I try and answer everybody's questions online when I see them. If I've missed them, I don't feel bad if you write it again. I feel bad that you have to write it again, but please keep asking on new pictures that I post in case you've missed any of them. So, okay, there. Danny, hi Danny, yes. Can you tell us about some unused episode ideas? So that's a very good question. So, a normal sitcom in America shoots, let's say, between 22 and 26 episodes a year. 26 is a lot. 22 is on the lower end. And so the way you would get episodes, at least for Everybody Loves Raymond, is Phil would have a board, a dry erase board in the writer's room. And you would come in with a potential story idea, or sometimes it was just a bad thing that happened to you in your life. And the worse our life was, the better the shows were, because nobody likes to see people getting along or people having, winning the lottery and everything goes their way. So we would put story ideas up on this dry erase board, and then you would, what's known as, you would flesh them out and see, okay, is there a story there? And a lot of times, there would be an idea up there, and then instantly the writers, and most importantly Phil, would spark to that idea. And if they sparked to the idea, that meant you would have this heated discussion. For example, I remember one time we had a show called Lateness, where Patty, if you remember, Patty has a hair curler stuck in her hair, and Ray leaves her. So that was a Steve Scrovan story, and I remember once we started talking about that in the writer's room, everybody came alive. Everybody was completely, because everybody has someone in their life who is really late all the time, somebody who gets annoyed by somebody who's really late all the time, and it wasn't just, men versus women, etc. So we always had a lot of fodder for that story idea. So we had another time. Season 1, Phil was like, we need more stories. So we all came in on a Saturday, and it might have been Scrovan as well, Steve Scrovan, one of the writers. There was something about disciplining children or whatever. And I remember we sat there maybe for 2 hours, and we're like, okay, maybe this or maybe that. And the episode just didn't come alive like would happen. Hello, Matt Romano, one of Ray's sons. Hello, Matt. And that episode, it came back eventually, but there wasn't that kind of energy in the room where it's like, this is going to be this. So getting back to the original question of undone story ideas, there wasn't really a big a big pile of shows that were ready to be made. And if you're real fans, which obviously if you're watching this, you are, we only did 16 the last season. And that was a negotiation between Phil and the president of CBS. Phil was saying, look, we're kind of burnt out. Not that we're tired of working, but we don't know that we have any really great stories to tell, any more great stories to tell. Because one of the things that you'll notice about the show is there aren't really, there's obviously some episodes that you like more than others, but there's no clunkers, let's say, in there. And that was because Phil made sure, and Ray, that we didn't do any shows that were, not great episodes. So when Phil and Ray came to the decision to end the series, that was the motivation. It wasn't, hey, we're kind of tired of coming into work, etc. It was, I don't think we have enough to sustain this level. And also, Peter, towards the end, Peter was ill with, he had multiple myeloma. And his health was declining. And so it just seemed like a good time to end it because of running out of story ideas. We've told almost every story that you can about people living in a that family situation, and Peter wasn't doing great, etc. So there you go. So where there's some story ideas, and someday I'll post a picture of that dry erase board where there are story ideas. I remember, for some reason, a lot of Scrovan stories. But he had one, he said he always felt like he was James Bond in kindergarten. And that sat on the dry erase board. We never did the show. There was no show. And that's another thing I think to explore. To warrant an episode of a show, it really has to be a good story. And so even though you have certain funny things where you go, okay, this is a funny scene, that very seldom leads to an episode. So, and I think, somebody's posting about, and this is related. So there's a lot of shows that are doing remakes, and it's great. Will and Grace, I know Gilmore Girls did a bunch. I know there's a lot of shows that are doing remakes, but I think to do another version of the show now, it's very tough because obviously Peter and Doris are no longer around. And Doris, Marie, was really the driving force in that show because she cared so much about Ray and Robert, and she was clueless about how terrible she was to Deborah. So if you cornered Marie, if you cornered the character Marie and said, you're really being a bad person to Deborah, she would be horrified because she's coming from this place of love. And so you really have to have Marie to make the series as it was in, as we all know and love, the same. And it just can't go back, you can't go back there. Hello, Luke Fontana saying hello. Luke Fontana is a photographer, and I want to have him join us in the future because he is doing a Will and Grace book, and I'd be curious about his experience versus my experience when I was shooting on the series, because I was there as a writer, and I happened to have my camera and take 30,000 behind-the-scene photos over the whole 9 seasons. And Luke went on to do the episode, to shoot for a very specific reason, and he wasn't part of the show, so he was kind of an outsider coming in, where I was kind of an inside, That's funny. Someone saying, do you think they would have stayed married? I always thought Deborah was one golf game away from dumping Ray. Yeah, I think they would have been, I think they'd still be married. And I know a lot of people are commenting, like, I can't believe they aren't a couple in real life. And that I would call good acting. They for 9 years, you do get close to people. Ray and Patty are married in real life, have always been married in real life during the series. And so they were going through all those trials and tribulations. But, Patty is an unbelievable actress, and Ray as well. You're seeing that, you see that well if you've seen Ray in Parenthood, or if you saw him in The Irishman. So they're really good acting. And I think the people, and I noticed some people got angry at people insinuating that they must have had an affair. It's just really good acting. And they do, there's a lot of questions about do they see each other? Yeah, Patty and Ray, everybody, Brad, they see each other, but obviously now it's really tough. But it's like anybody else. You're busy, you're working, and so it's not like... it's not like you're able to see people even on best terms, unless of course you're roommates or something like that. Yes. By the way, they call him this, but I don't. But Marty Scorsese, someone mentioned The Irishman being good. Martin Scorsese had never seen Everybody Loves Raymond and had never heard of Ray Romano, had zero awareness of him when they were casting Ray in a show called Vinyl for HBO. And so Ray, who was incredulous, not that Ray thinks, everybody should have heard the show, but you would think on a flight, even if you don't watch a lot of TV, it's in the zeitgeist. It's out there in the ether. But he never saw Ray, and obviously liked Ray's acting when he submitted a tape and put him in Vinyl, and then ultimately in The Irishman. So now, yes, The Irishman is... Yes, Patty did have Ray wish her son a happy birthday, which was very nice. Yeah. So now, here was another question. Somebody was asking about the no-roll game. And I'm hoping that was written by Aaron Shore. If you guys remember that, that was the sex game thing that they were playing. And that did spring out of a real life story. I'll wait for Aaron Shore to come on again to tell that story. And I think there was another one. Yes, it's so many questions. By the way, somebody did ask why only an hour, and I don't know if I can go the whole hour this time, but that's the limit on Instagram. You cannot go longer than an hour. So you'll see, I think when Monica, Amy, was talking to me, we got cut off. And even with Phil, we got cut off because we enjoy talking and it's going to be a long conversation. I'm watching a countdown clock when we're about to get cut off. So here's a question about the house layout. I always pictured Frank and Marie's living room. Let me see if I can scroll back. Can you talk about the house layouts? I always pictured Frank and Marie living across the street from Ray and Deborah's front door, but how do they know to come to the back door so often? Yeah, that is an excellent question and something we would talk about in the writer's room because in real life, those two homes are in Long Island and they're directly across from each other. And so if Frank and Marie left their house, they would walk straight across the street and they would walk in the front door. Now, before I go further, we used to say in the writer's room, if people are worried about what door they're coming into or worried about something that's in the background of a scene, then we are making a very boring show. So for the most part, we just did whatever door helped the scene. So I think in real life, there are houses where you never use the front door or you seldom use the front door. And I know that especially if you're familiar with those houses on Long Island, there's usually a side entrance that goes into the kitchen. And so you don't have to go through the living room, etc. So at some point, I have the drawings of the house. I have the layout of the house somewhere, the blueprints, and it shows here's stage 5 of Everybody Loves Raymond, and it'll show that aerial view. So there are, and I'm sure a lot of you listening, there is no logic to which door you come into. And yes, there's some houses where there's only the front door really makes sense to come into, but I know for a lot of the East Coast houses especially, you do have those two entrances. Very, very good question. Yes. Sorry, I'm just scanning through these great questions. This is awesome. Yes, the bloopers. So watching the bloopers, so a lot of times Ray would come up with second takes, which were alternate lines within the script that only he would know, and you would get a lot of the cast laughing because they didn't know what was coming. And generally, you can't change the script too much because the actor that you're acting with, so when Ray's acting with Patty or Brad or Doris, they have a feed, like they know when Ray's done talking because they've rehearsed it for 5 days. So if all of a sudden Ray's just throwing in different lines, it's going to not be good for the scene. So Ray only did it when it was a specific line that just stands alone and it's the end of a sentence and it's this joke that, it doesn't require anything after that. But the bloopers are great, and I think that's a sign of Phil ran a very well-oiled machine, so there wasn't tension of trying to get the scene done, and we're in trouble here. So it was the filming, which would take 3 hours, 4 hours, which is actually a short time in the world of sitcoms. We were usually in good shape, meaning, when there's a lot of tension, there's not a lot of tolerance for goofing around because you have 200 people in a live audience, you have 130 people working on the show, and so people are trying to get that show done and in the can. Yes, will Ray come on and join us? Ray will definitely come on at some point. Here's the problem with Ray coming on. And I just saw Ray a few days ago. I saw Ray, I saw Phil, I saw Brad. Ray does zero social media. And when I say zero, the only thing he has is a website that has like 1 or 2 pictures and says the dates that he'll be performing in Vegas. So Ray has zero. So I would have to go through someone else's account. And I don't know how many of you people are following the Everett Raymond 360 on Facebook, because not to characterize the demographic, but even a lot of the Raymond writers are not on Instagram. And so you have some, Brad is on Instagram. Hopefully he'll join, and Patty. But so Ray will come on. I just don't know when and how we arrange that. Yes, Patty. Yes, so Patty dropping the turkey in the in-laws. Yeah, that was a very perfectly executed physical stunt by Patty. I mean, she's, I can't speak highly enough about Patty or anybody in the cast, but Patty would amaze me because she was amazing at physical comedy, amazing at acting, very pretty, and very believable and honest on screen. So she was that rare combination. So for that turkey scene, it was not an easy scene to pull off because she has to slip without falling. She has this heavy turkey that she has to get into the oven. So yeah, and so the question, if there's a question like, was it planned? Yes, it was definitely planned. So beautiful. Yes, amazing chemistry. Best show. These are so nice. Yes, I'm glad you like the Instagram Live, and I'll try and do it as much as possible. Yeah, so people who were watching, there's a comment about Netflix. Too bad it's not on Netflix, although I made, a request to the Netflix team. So that, here, I will share this. Errol's Raymond is on the Peacock network now, we know, the Peacock streaming, Peacock TV. All of this has to do with the sale of the show. So we all wished it was still on Netflix, but the show, the way it's sold, has to be, they're asking for money for the show. This has nothing to do with any of the writers or even Phil in negotiating these deals. This is CBS trying to find a home. And it's a little confusing because you're like, Everett Raymond was a CBS show, but it wound up on now an NBC network. And Friends is on HBO Max now, I think it's called. So it's only about the sale. So the reason it's not on Netflix is because they were making a sale. And you get more money when you make something more exclusive. So there's no way that they could have it on Netflix and then be on Peacock because Peacock is getting that money. So that's kind of the behind the scenes. Yes, I love Ray's random nicknames for Deborah whenever he gets home. So, those Ray would just make up, and they were just, sitting there trying to think of what's a funny name. And I should say this, all of this, what I said before about doing those second takes, all of this is possible because Phil had the show so well run that you have this room to, for lack of a better thing, to riff. It's almost like you're a jazz musician and you have this song and you have it down and now you can go around it. So those names that Ray made up, 100% Ray, completely just said, what's the funniest name I can call her? And then he would come in and deliver that name. And every once in a while, Patty would laugh just at the name because it was so ridiculous. I live in Greece, so no Peacock for me. Thanks, though. Yeah, I wish I had control over where Peacock or Everett Raymond was streaming. But I'm surprised that Peacock doesn't exist there. It's interesting. Brad is on Instagram. Yes. Yes, that is correct. So Brad is on Instagram. We'll have Brad on, and we'll have to go through one of Ray's kids. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, to get Ray on here. Yes, we'll get them all. Okay, got beautiful. Look at these great questions. I like her with the suitcase when Ray is pulling her legs to the top of the stairs. Yeah, so we'll have Tucker Cawley. That's a Tucker Cawley script. We will have Tucker on, and that's a real life story that happened. And yes, Patty was fantastic in that episode as well. She was being pulled, if those of you who haven't seen the baggage episode, what's interesting is now that the show is on demand, you see the titles of the shows. But when it was on the network only, nobody in the public knew what the titles were because I don't know the name of a Seinfeld episode. I loved Seinfeld, but I don't know the actual name of the episode. But now you're starting to see it. So the baggage, which would be called the luggage episode, when Ray and I would do stand-up tours and people would yell out names, they would name something memorable from that episode. So yeah, Patty, phenomenal on that. All the food looked edible. Yeah. Hi, Teresa. Yes, good. All the food was edible when they were making it. And I got to tell you, there's a chocolate cake that I got to ask our prop master, Rhonda. There was a chocolate cake that is featured in a bunch of episodes. And they went to a bakery in Burbank and had them make extra chocolate in that delicious chocolate cake. So I'm going to find out where I'll find out where that cake, the bakery is. I'll get that delicious cake and I'll eat it here on Instagram Live and describe how good it is. A question, was there a studio audience for every episode? Yes. Every single episode of Everett Raymond, other than the one clip show we did, there was a live studio audience of approximately 200 people. I'll get the exact count. But yes, in a lot of the photos you'll see, in the photo I put up today where I'm standing at the end of the bleachers, that photograph, you see most of the audience. So every single audience. And the reason you want a live audience with a comedy because the actors get their timing from that live audience. And we were talking to Mark Sweet, the warm-up guy, about it. It's a very important thing. And now I know that some of the sitcoms are coming back and they may not have a live audience. So it's going to be really an interesting thing. Yeah. Teresa, what's with the ginger ale? Good question. So Ray in real life doesn't drink coffee. He doesn't drink alcohol. Not because he had a drinking problem. He just doesn't drink alcohol. And so he did love ginger ale. So that eventually was put into the show because we needed him to drink. And there was one argument And when I say an argument, it's a discussion in the writer's room. So there was one discussion in the writer's room where Ray was supposed to drink coffee. And Phil said, just drink. And Ray's like, I don't drink coffee. I wouldn't drink coffee. And Phil's like, well, we kind of, there's a coffee maker and whatever. And Ray said something funny. This is season 2. Phil's like, well, I guess eventually I'm going to have to act. So the ginger ale was just appeasing Ray because he really drank it in person. So excellent question. Yes, streaming on Peacock now. When he tried to pull out Deborah's splinter, yeah. Yes, that's a perfect example of Patty. Great physicality and getting thrown around, by Ray. Yeah, funniest moment when Ray tried to put Deborah on the top of the fridge. Yeah, that's a great episode, and we talked about that a little bit with Monica. So basically, Brad throws Monica onto the refrigerator. We had to lower the refrigerator so Brad could do it. I think Brad's back was hurting or something. And then Patty gets thrown against the refrigerator. I'll have to ask Patty when she's on if it hurt her. Yeah. Why wasn't Phil and Ray's moms on the show like the dads were? What a great question. That is a really great question. I don't think they had any desire to be on the show. So if you've watched Phil's show, Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix, where he travels the world and eats, you can see me. I'm in the Soul episode. You see Phil's mother. But Max, Phil's father, I think is more of a ham. And, I'll have to ask Phil. Next time Phil's on, I'll have to ask him. So my blind guess is they don't like Ray's mother is I think she was the youngest graduate of Juilliard as a piano player. She was a very, very good piano player, concert piano player, and then kind of gave it up to raise her kids, her 3 sons. But she was a very shy and not wanting to be on camera. And so that's my blind guess. It wasn't that they were trying to be on the show and Phil's like, no, I'm going to keep our mothers off of the show. And also, they were funny. There was a place for Ray's father and Brad's father, and Phil's father as well. Yes. So, Michelle, yes, the letter. Very funny episode. So, the letter, if those of you remember, Deborah writes a letter, and she doesn't want to send it. And she ends up sending it. She wants to send it, but you get the idea. It's a letter that should never be sent. And so that anything that shouldn't happen in real life is good for sitcom fodder. That was an example of an episode that started as it's about a Tupperware party. And Phil arranged for us to have a Tupperware party at the studio. So somewhere I have pictures of this Tupperware party with Phil and the other writers, and we're just getting a feel for what happens at the Tupperware party. And then in the writer's room, that episode morphed, and eventually Phil was like, okay, this is now called The Letter, and it evolved from there. But that was the first scene where there was a feeling of the audience just being so blown away by that scene where Ray goes in to try and get the letter back, and Frank is reading that letter. That was the first moment in the series where it just felt like everything was coming together perfectly. And, of course, the performance was outstanding. Now, we had an episode earlier where Standard Deviation, where Deborah puts some ice cream in Ray's lap. That is the longest laugh initially that we had. So that was season 1. But the letter was really an episode where everything came together. Yes, ELR is a comfort to me, like my go-to when I'm having a bad day. Yes. And I think that's great to hear. I think for a lot of people, because when I was growing up, I loved MASH. And MASH, the characters in MASH became kind of a surrogate family for me. And I think it's the same way for Everybody Loves Raymond. It's this stable family of good people who are just trying to get along and in life. And so I hear that from a lot, even from people in my own family who feel like ELR is their favorite thing. Yes, Deborah at the Lodge, great. That Deborah at the Lodge also had Ray's father and Phil's father. All right, scrolling through these questions. Thank you so much, by the way. All of these questions, love it. Love all these questions. Hank and Pat, yes, okay. Any injuries during filming? Yes, actually. Surprisingly, I wanna say maybe season 4, 5, 6. Robert is in his apartment, so whenever that happened, it was one of the episodes when Robert was in his apartment, and Ray goes over to visit. And I don't know if you guys know this, what happened, and I'll try and find pictures. Ray is standing in front of the coffee table, and he's talking to Robert. And in the scene, he reaches down and cuts some cheese for his cracker. And Ray, in real life, goes to do it, and so Ray goes, cut. No, seriously, cut. Ray had cut his finger with the knife, enough so that he had to get stitches. So we cut, there's 200 live people there. They rush Ray to a nearby medical facility. They give him stitches. While he's getting stitches, anybody on the show who did stand-up went in front of the audience, took a mic, went in front of the audience, and did stand up to stall. And then Ray came back with stitches in his finger and ended up finishing the show. So yes, that was the injury. But no, there was no injury when Frank went down the steps. Peter was fine. Deborah getting slammed against her. There was never an injury where people stopped. There were some bruised egos, maybe, other than that. I think I read where there was another actress in the running for the part of Deborah, but Ray pushes for Patty to get the part. That is true. Maggie Wheeler was up for the part also, and Maggie Wheeler's phenomenal. But there was another actress that the president of CBS wanted, and Phil actually pushed for Patty. I mean, not that Ray didn't want her too, but in the structure of the show. So this is, and again, some of this is interesting to some of you, but in the structure of a show, you have a showrunner. So when you have All in the Family, you have Norman Lear is the showrunner. He's the head of the show. Or when you have 2.5 Men or Big Bang, you have a Chuck Lorre, and Phil is the head of, was the showrunner of Ray. But the show was developed was the showrunner of Everybody Loves Raymond. The show was developed out of a development deal with Letterman, with Ray to star in it. So Ray also has, a say in the development, and you have to work together as people. But the showrunner really has the final say. So when you watch a show, for example, when you watch King of Queens, that show was developed and Kevin was cast in that show. Kevin James was cast in the show. Very funny. Kevin, very funny. Show was very funny. But Kevin initially doesn't have that much power. And so for choosing of Patty, Phil, who had never run a show before, does have as much power as you can as someone who has never run a show before. The network is the one that puts you on the air. So you still have to keep the network happy. So if the president of CBS said, if you go with Patty Heaton, I'm not going to put the show on the air, now you have a big fight happening. So, all right, I hope that was insightful. Was there any external shooting actually done in New Jersey? So the exteriors of Ray and Deborah's house are in Long Island. That is location filming. So nobody on the show ever went to that location. So it's very weird. If you look up, I think you can find it online. You can find those exteriors. The show never went to New York to shoot anything. Did they shoot exteriors with another they quote unquote, it's not B-roll technically, but did they have establishing shots? Yes. That were in New York? Yes, absolutely. But it was always shot in Los Angeles. And even, I have to say, somewhere online you can look up, and there's a picture of the cast of All in the Family, and they're in the parking lot at Television City, which is here in Los Angeles, CBS Television City. And there's Archie Bunker and Edith, and they're standing in this sunny parking lot, and there's palm trees, and it didn't make sense in my brain because I know that All in the Family, they live in Queens, and they live in a little house in Queens, and so for Everest Raymond, a lot of people thought we shot in New York because it was so convincing, and you see the exterior shot of a house in New York. So, okay, Barbara, yes, good question, excellent question, and that's kind of a long story, but the question from Barbara is, who's next? Was that based on someone's real life experience? So let me look at the time and see. Yeah, do I want to tell this story? Okay, I'll tell you a little bit of the story. So according to Writers Guild, so we're all in the Writers Guild, the writers. You have to be in the Writers Guild to write on a network show. And you're supposed to take an outside script. So Phil every year would have to have outside writers come in and pitch. And I don't know what the motive behind that, whether it was to give people a chance to write who were not on the staff. I think it's a good idea. But for the most part, to write an episode of a script and you're the outsider is very, very hard. So it represents more work for the showrunner, because now the showrunner, Phil in this case, goes, okay, I'm going to hire a writer. Even if they're a great writer, and even if they have a great idea, I know we're going to have to rewrite most of the episode because no one can capture the voice of these characters like the writers on the show. And even for the writers on the show, it's a lot of work to nail that episode. So an outside writer came in. She was a great writer. She had all these great ideas, and she pitched all these stories. And when you're pitching, that means you're coming into the writer's room, and you're going, okay, first of all, you're in a strange writer's room. All the writers know that you're taking work away from them because you're taking one of the scripts away from them. So you're sitting there pitching your heart out, and she pitched all these great stories. And if you pitch, you could say, here's an idea. Ray and Deborah go on a trip, and there's a suitcase, and maybe they kind of, neither one of them wants to empty the suitcase, and it escalates into a fight. So you're kind of pitching like that and trying to tell the story and also have it be entertaining enough for them to think to do it. So this woman comes in. She pitches a whole bunch of story ideas, and they're all good, but Phil doesn't spark to any of them. So then Phil literally says, at the end of, I don't know, maybe it was a half hour or 45 minutes of this woman going, and they were very detailed pitches, meaning she would go, so in the first act, in the teaser, and then you set up, so she really explored every detail of this story. She put in a lot of work, is my point. Phil didn't like anything of that, kind of, okay, and he did want her to get a story. And then he said, I'm so sorry, these were great, but I didn't see anything. Is there anything else you have? And as she was already like packing up her stuff, she goes, well, my friend's parents used to fight about who would they marry if one of them died. And Phil said, oh my gosh, that's all she said too. She didn't go, well, I thought in this part you would happen. She didn't flesh it out, as we'd say, in any way. But it seemed like the perfect recipe for a married couple to fight. Because as soon as you pick your next spouse, it can't go well. It can never go well. It can only go poorly, which makes for a very funny episode. Yeah, so that's great. That's great. That was a great question. Yes. How were the outdoor scenes filmed? The outdoor film scenes, like, for example, when Robert... It gets confusing because I know them better as their real names. But when Robert proposes to Deborah, that's on the back lot. That was on the back lot of Warner Brothers. So that's the New York City street. Friends used it all the time. It's still there. They paint it for it's amazing how much they can change. So that was there. When Robert gets gored by the bull, that's the same location. There was like Bully on the Bus, I think there was one location. There were very, very few times we went outside of the studio, though. Very, very few times. Yes, the episode introducing Robert's ex-wife, Joanne, which is based on Ray's brother. Real life story. The scene where Ray throws Deborah up against the fridge. Yes, we talked about that, which was great. Thank you for bringing that up again. Yes, the toaster wife. I'm not just a trophy. The toaster episode. I'm not just a trophy wife. Yeah, that was the real thing that happened to Phil. I'll tell that another time, or Phil can tell it this time. But that was a great episode. So, any chance for a reunion show? Here's what I think could happen, because I've talked to Phil about this, and after the show ended, Phil wanted to do a spinoff, and CBS didn't want to do a spinoff, which was odd. But Phil wanted to do a spinoff with Robert and Amy, and there was stuff. So I shouldn't say right out that CBS didn't want to, but when Phil comes on, he can tell us more of the details. But it wasn't for lack of trying. And I know that, Friends did Joey, right? So there is a possibility there of which would have been a good series, potentially, of Robert and Amy's life. So that was discussed. But I think now, in all my conversations with Phil and Ray, the only thing I could see them doing is just, reminiscing, which I think is what Friends was going to do. I think the cast of Friends was set to do a reunion show where they sit on a stage. I don't know exactly, but this is what I gathered. They sit on a stage and reminisce. And I think something like that is definitely possible until, Do I have a favorite episode? Yeah, that's a very big question. Do I have a favorite episode? It's so hard. There's 209 episodes. Ray and I wrote a lot of episodes together. Jealous Robert we wrote, which I thought turned out really good, where Marie and Deborah are in cahoots. That's a good one, where Robert dates Gianni. I loved She's the One, where the woman eats the fly. We worked on that. Mike Royce and I had to. So that was written by Ray and Phil, but Mike Royce and I helped out on the beginning of that episode. And that was really good. And that was something that Ray came up with when we were trying to come up with a movie idea for Ray and Kevin James. And we sat for a week in the writer's room. This was not during Raymond, but we were in the Raymond writer's room. And the only thing we could come up with was, when I say for a week, just trying to brainstorm, the one funny thing was Ray said, what if you're dating someone, I see her eat a fly? It just sounded crazy, and then it ended up becoming something. And the date for She's the One, that episode, really did happen to Ray's brother, a date similar to that, which maybe we'll have Ray's brother on. I don't know if he's on Instagram. And are you guys on Facebook? Are you guys watching on Facebook? Because I'll be doing some Facebook Lives as well. And I know that more of the Raymond writers are on Facebook, so it would be easier to get them to join on. The Italy episodes really underlined the love between Ray and Deborah as mother and son, and also the ones that depicted, yes, the love between Ray and Deborah as a couple. Yes, excellent point. Excellent point. Was there any episodes planned for season 10? No, because Phil and Ray were going to stop at season 8. So if any of you have the book, the Evers Raymond Our Family Album book, we were going to end at the end of season 8. And so we had to get the book to where it was being printed before the show ended, so that the book would be available for sale before the show ended. That's why if you have the book, it only goes up, I think, halfway through season 8, and that's why. And so at the last minute, Phil and Ray decided to do season 9, and they only did 16 episodes. We only did 16 episodes. So no, there wasn't a whole bevy, if you missed it earlier, there wasn't a whole bevy of episodes at the beginning, at the end of season 9, where we said we have 20 more to shoot. Now, we all wanted to keep going. You're all of a sudden, you have a family of 130 people who have worked together for 9 years, and then it just stops. And as you know, if you're a fan of shows, it's very hard to get a hit show. And so a lot of us were sad that the show ended. So, yes. Right, Teresa. The letter. Frank says it's a petition. Where do I sign? Great. Oh, did they go to Italy? Yes. So they went to Italy for some of the scenes in the Italy episode. Absolutely. And then the rest we shot on stage. So I've posted a few of those on stage, and you see some of the characters that were in Italy are now at the Warner Brothers stage, and they built the set. So you would be amazed what they can build on a stage. It really looks convincing. So yes, they really did travel to Italy. Great. All right, we have to wrap it up in a little bit. Ray, yes, with Fruit of the Month. Yes, Fruit of the Month Club. That happened to Ray. That happened to Phil in real life. He really gave his parents Fruit of the Month, and he told that story. And when the show was picked up, I was with Ray, and there's something called the upfronts. The upfronts take place every spring in New York City. And the reason that you read about these monstrous salaries of some of the stars, maybe Ray, maybe everyone from Friends, the reason they're able to pay that is because advertisers pay so much money to advertise on a hit show. It's why the Super Bowl still, even though it's crazy money, is still a bargain because you're reaching so many eyeballs. So the upfronts is what happens every year in New York City at the beginning of the TV season. And what it is the president of each network goes in front of, and I'm going to give you an example of how important the day is. For CBS, they had The Who performing live for advertisers in their seats in Carnegie Hall. I think it took place at Carnegie Hall, yeah. And so if you can afford to pay The Who to play 2 songs, you know how much is at stake. So when they initially announced that Everett Raymond was going to be picked up, the Fruit of the Month Club came into play because Ray walked on stage with a box of peaches or box of pears, and gave it to the president of CBS. So that actually happened. Phil gave his parents that, and he gave, I think it was at his brother's wedding, he gave a speech about it, and it ended up in the episode, and it's a killer part of that episode. Yes, MASH. So one of the guys that directed some Raymond episodes, his name is Ken Levine. I'll have him on here if he wants to. He was the head writer of MASH for a while, I believe. He definitely worked on MASH. So when he directed some Raymond episodes, I think Pet Sematary was one of them, which is a story that really happened to Steve Scrovan. But I would ask him MASH stories about Radar and what was it like behind the scenes, just like a normal fan. Yeah, you would want to do it. When Robert almost became a model, yes. That was also that was a great one. Yes, when their photo. Someone asked if I took the photos of that, and I did not take I took the photos of them shooting that scene, but I didn't take the bad photos. I think they used the actual camera that Ray was holding, but I'll have to ask Rhonda. The comic book store with Pee Wee. Yes, Paul Rubens. You forgot his name, Paul Rubens. Everyone does know him as Pee Wee, so you're forgiven. Was hilarious with 2 of them, and the 2 of them were so good. Yes, that was a great episode. Yes, Paul Rubens. ELR is the only show that makes my grandfather laugh out loud, and I'm assuming he's not a big laugher, or that's a great compliment. Good, that's very good. Hello, Malcolm. How did you handle the height differences between the giant guys and the petite girls? That's funny. Yeah, I mean, camera-wise, that was a tough challenge because I think Patty's 5'2" or something, maybe 5'1". Brad is 6'8", 6'9". Ray is 6'1". So it was not easy camera-wide. Not to get boring and technical, but you're just living in a wider shot on those things. But they didn't do any trickery. Like Patty was never on, high shoes, because sometimes you do. There are movie stars, short men movie stars who wear lifts, and Patty never wore lifts, Who was driving the car that drove backwards into Ray's home? Stuntmen? No, that was them. That was the cast. There were no stuntmen. So that's a really good question. And it was pulled by a pulley underneath. I posted some of the pictures from on top. But yeah, that was then, and that was a great episode. And how did the audience and cast react all in one take? Yes, I can't imagine having to rebuild for another shot. Yeah, so for the episode called Wallpaper, was our 100th episode, they shot it one day without an audience, and then the next day in front of the audience, and then they did rebuild the set while the audience waited. And they had practiced, and it was, I want to say it's 20 minutes. I'll have one of the crew members on if they're on Instagram. And if not, we'll have to go to Facebook. Yes. Okay, good question from Malcolm. The Jazz Records album, yeah, that was based on a real-life story that happened to me, where my father would constantly bring up that I ruined his jazz records as a child, and I didn't remember it at all. So I thought that might be interesting. And Phil added the twist of let's have Robert ruin those jazz records and not say anything, which was great. And I think that song, Bye Bye Blackbird, by that rendition by Oscar Peterson and Ben Webster was probably heard more on that night than it ever was before. Yes. Was Deborah ever pregnant in the early episodes? Absolutely. I'll have to figure out the years, the exact time that she was pregnant, but you can see it in the photos, and I'll post, I don't want Patty to get mad at me, but I'll post a few times when she was obviously pregnant, and still looked good. But yes, and I remember she told Phil I don't really show much, and she showed a lot. So if you'll notice, they're walking in with, she'll be walking in with bigger and bigger things we use to hide her pregnancy. I think she was pregnant twice. I know she was pregnant during the toaster episode. I think she was pregnant twice during the series. But I'll find out. We'll find out from her. I'll figure it out. Who decided to have all the children have blonde hair? Well, Ray's daughter in real life has blonde hair. And both Ray and his real wife have dark hair. So it's a recessive gene. So they based it on his real life. So he has that. That's how that decision was made. And then they are brother and sister. The Sweetens are brother and sister. So that's how that happened. Yes, the wedding tape. The wedding tape was based on, Aaron Shore. We talked a little about that. Aaron Shore really erased his wedding for an Everest Raymond episode, and that's so far. Now, this is interesting. Joe Ped 59. How about Father Huntley? How did you cast him? He was a World War II hero in real life. It's very interesting because I talked to Charles Durning after. So he was cast because we actually had a priest in an earlier episode in season 1, and he had trouble with his lines, and so it took forever to get that take. And then ultimately, I'll have to ask Phil about how he did cast Charles Durning, but Charles Durning is fantastic. So the fact that he did the show was phenomenal. But after filming one day, I started talking to Charles Durning, and he told me about his World War II experiences, and we talked for an hour after the show, sitting at Ray and Deborah's kitchen table. He was in Normandy, and some incredible stories that I hope somebody filmed. How come Kevin James had several different roles in ELR? Good question. So Kevin is a stand-up from New York initially who was friends with Ray, and I knew Kevin as well. And he had a development deal with, I want to say, NBC to try and develop a show. But he was very funny. Kevin is one of the funniest human beings that I've ever seen. And so they were just, Phil wanted to have him in the show. So initially we put him in the show in I can't remember the character that he was. Was it the cable guy maybe? Maybe John. I don't even know. Well, they tried to get him in the show. And then they had him again in another, thing, in another role. But this is all before King of Queens. And then once King of Queens happened, Ray did a crossover episode with him. And some of you fans will know better what Kevin's name was, later on. And Ray, Kevin, and I wrote an episode called Golf. Because it's confusing because there's also an episode called Golf for It, where they're all that, which I also wrote with Tucker and Mike Royce, where they're all in the car. But the Kevin James and I were one where Ray has the doctor who says, go play golf. I noticed Robert's accent became more as the series progressed. His New York accent, or I'm not sure. Yeah. So the IQ test, that was the first episode. That was like episode 3 or 4. That was a really good episode. Also Tucker Cawley. So look at all these great questions. I'm hoping I'm not missing many of them, but I will. Yes, Gianni played several roles. True. Gianni, who's John Manfrotati, also a stand-up, also from New York, also a good friend of Ray's. They were just trying to get him into the episodes. And so, now it's hindsight. The show did really well, and it was on the air for 9 years. But initially, they only ordered, I want to say, 9 episodes or 6 episodes. So you don't have the luxury of going, how can I get my friend into my talented friend who deserves to be on air? How do I get him into this? You're more worried about just keeping the show alive. So Phil and Ray both on their shoulders was like, how do we keep the show on the air? So they gave him that role. Yes. Yes. Peter Boyle, hysterical. Morph into new. Yes, that's true. Yeah, it is true. It would be great to see Ray and Deborah morph into the new Frank and Marie. Yes, I don't know that that is a funny idea. Whose idea was it to have the family on a conveyor belt in the early years? I think that was a Phil idea for the promo. I remember filming that. That was that I believe was beginning of season 2, because initially, if you remember from the pilot, they had Ray building a house and getting trapped in the house, which was actually very funny, and you didn't see him. Yes, Johnny, cable repair. Yes, Johnny, cable guy. Yes. That's right. Great. Hello, Key. You love the book. That's great. I didn't know ELR's on Facebook, so I'm going to go check it out after that Instagram Live. Yes, if you're on Facebook, check it out. I haven't posted as many pictures as I do on Instagram, but I will be posting them, and you can write a little bit more. In hindsight, does Ray regret ending at 9? I don't think so. Because, as you know, Ray did another series called Men of a Certain Age, and then he did if you haven't seen The Big Sick, by the way, Ray is in The Big Sick. It's a really good movie, and so Ray has really moved on. Does he miss the people? Yes. Does Phil? Yes. Everybody misses the people, etc. So we're down to 3 minutes. So I'm gonna wrap this up, unfortunately, because it's just gonna cut me off. I think we will keep doing this on weekends, which is good, around this time. Yes, Chris Elliott is very reclusive in real life. Interesting. Yes, I've been to Chris's house. He's a very nice guy. Someone's writing, Ray was 5'11" and 3/4. Yes, that's an episode that I wrote called 6 Feet Under, where Ray finds out that he has shrunk. Great. You guys know this show so well. I bought Coleman Hawkins and Bedwester for my dad on CD. Great. Also, great to hear. When she went to Robert's apartment, she was pregnant. You are correct, Teresa. I trust you that you know more than me. I'm scrolling through. All right. I'm going to have to say goodbye. Let me see if I can answer one more time. And let me know if you have any other questions. Just post them, and I'll try and get to them if I'm ignoring them. It's not that I'm ignoring them. It's just that I miss them, etc. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I covered my favorite episodes. That's a tough one. Oh, and yes, I was asked what was the hardest one to film. There's no real hard. The more challenging thing is when there's a story that you're the writing process is the hardest part. Trying to think of that story. Once it's in the hand of the actors and the story works, and Phil and Ray were so good, it becomes really it was fun. And I think when you see my photos during the week, there's not a lot to do. You're watching, and so I happen to have a camera. I take a lot of photos, so I was able to capture all that time. And during the filming of the show, also, you're just watching it, and because it was so well run by Phil, you have the luxury of kind of being able to take pictures, etc. Are there complete DVDs of all seasons sold? Yes, there are. All right. Thank you so much. Look at the description at the header of the Instagram, and you'll see more information about me. And I will see you guys next week. And if we have a guest, we'll have a guest. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Keep those questions coming.